Dutch with the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support.
Welcome back, Nacho Knots. This is the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support, and today a very special welcome to all of our new students in my Humanities 101 class joining us for the first time. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Nachos, where curiosity is celebrated, unlearning is encouraged, and your story matters just as much as any textbook. If you're new here, take a deep breath. You don't need to perform, prove, or pretend. You're here and that's enough. And we build this space together with compassion, honesty, and honestly, a little bit of cheesy joy. So to our new students, this week kicks off your journey into the heart of humanities. And this is not just a study of history or ideas, but it is reflecting on what it means to be human in the here and now. That includes you, your voice, your questions, your neurodivergence, your neurotypicality, your lived experience, your curiosity. And a quick reminder, your first never attended assignment, your onboarding form for the course, is due tonight. Please carve out a few minutes to complete it. It's not just a form, it's your first chance to say, here I am, this is how I learn, this is what matters to me. And here's the most important part. Engage. Don't just watch videos or click assignments. Participate. Ask questions. Make comments. Start conversations. Push yourself to think in new ways, even if they feel unfamiliar or uncertain at first. This is more than a class, it's a community. And like any community, it grows stronger when we show up, when we speak up, and when we lift each other up. So whether you're tuning in while folding laundry, walking your dog, or trying to make sense of a long week, we're glad you're here. Let this space be a reminder that learning can be joyful, that thinking differently is a gift, and that showing up as your full self is more than enough. As Mark Twain said, the secret to getting ahead is getting started. So let's get started. Let's take a moment to zoom in on something that might be sitting right in front of you or right next to you right now. Maybe in your favorite mug, and maybe it's steaming gently in the corner of your desk. Of course, I'm talking about coffee. And for many of us, it's more than a beverage. It's a ritual, a morning anchor, a moment of pause. And according to a new study from Tufts University, it might also be a quiet contributor to a longer life. Researchers followed over 46,000 U.S. adults for nearly 2 decades and found something striking. Those who drank 1 to 3 cups of black caffeinated coffee daily were significantly less likely to die from heart disease or from any cause at all compared to those who didn't drink coffee. The sweet spot, it turns out, is moderation, around 3 cups a day, and crucially, without too much added sugar or cream. Now, that doesn't mean that coffee's a magic elixir and that you should be drinking it by the gallons. It doesn't mean that we should all start chugging espresso shots in pursuit of immortality. But it does mean that our everyday choices, our simple rituals, and even the small comforts we build into our mornings can shape us in quiet and profound ways. And that's a theme we return to again and again here on Nachos. The power of the everyday. The way something seemingly ordinary, a breath, a boundary, a cup of coffee, can become a micro accommodation, a form of self-care, a statement that says, I matter, my body matters, and my rhythms matter. This story reminds us that health isn't only about grand gestures or dramatic overhauls. Sometimes it's about showing up for yourself every morning in very, very small ways. Drinking something warm, noticing your heartbeat, asking, what do I actually need today? and then adjust accordingly. And it's heart. This and at its heart, if you think about it, this research invites us to lean into intentionality. Not just what we do, but how we do it. It's not just the coffee, it's the care with which we brew it, the stillness we allow ourselves while sipping, the restraint we practice when we skip the third spoonful of sugar. It's the act of being present. So maybe today we take that cup of coffee as a metaphor, a reminder that we don't have to rush to reinvent ourselves. We can start with one habit, one pause, one shift. And that, my dear Nacho Knots, is what we're all about here. Because just like our opening quote reminded us, the secret to getting ahead is getting started. And maybe, just maybe, getting started begins with that first sip. And as our mug slowly empties and the warmth lingers in our hands, we shift gently, holding on to that sense of grounded ritual as we turn towards another kind of care. One that doesn't come in a cup, but in the form of a moment. A moment that is held with intention, trust, and the courage to heal. Imagine, just for a second, someone navigating the unbearable weight of a cancer diagnosis and major depression or anxiety. Now imagine that person offered not just more medication, but something much, much more rare. A single, carefully supported experience with a particular substance paired with thoughtful therapy and integration that might actually help. The substance? Well, psilocybin. And this isn't an escape, it's a doorway. Not a cure, but a clearing. And then something beautiful happens. The fog lifts and stays gone. Over half of the participants in a study experienced profound, lasting relief from depression. Nearly 43% saw sustained reductions in anxiety in this recent study. Now, just for days, and it wasn't just for days, and it wasn't just for a fleeting few moments, but for some people up to 2 years. And it's not just clinical, and it's not just progress, it's about reclamation of self. And here at Nachos, we talk about micro accommodations, those gentle daily rhythms that bring us back to balance. But sometimes healing requires macro space too. Not bigger effort, just deeper holding. A rare and sacred pause in the chaos, a moment of safety so complete that it allows us to open, soften, and rewire. And it's not about glamorizing psychedelics. It's about recognizing that transformation comes in many forms. It's about knowing that routine and revelation can coexist, that our daily rituals matter, and sometimes so do the brave, beautiful leaps we take into the unknown. Because you, dear viewer and listener, are not broken. You're not behind. You're already whole. And sometimes healing is just a slow, courageous work of remembering what has always been true. So let's linger here in that space of remembering, because the very next story invites us to reconsider and to consider something even more miraculous. Not a grand leap, not a deep therapy session, just a step outside. A new study from the University of Amsterdam shows that when we look at the world around us, a sidewalk, a hallway, a forest trail, our brain immediately begins mapping out how we could move through it. Not with conscious thought, but with deeply embodied wisdom. Your brain says, I could walk there, I could climb that, I could dive in, without permission, without needing permission, without needing instructions. And that's something artificial intelligence cannot replicate. And yet, and maybe it won't be able to ever. Because this isn't just about seeing, it's about sensing, it's about feeling, it's about being. It's the primal knowing that lives inside you, the architecture of care that your body builds without your asking, telling you that you belong in this world and that you're a part of the terrain, not an intruder. So maybe today your act of self-care isn't a bath or a journal entry. Maybe it's stepping outside and letting your body tell you what it knows. Maybe you climb a tree. Maybe it's pausing to feel the path beneath your feet, to notice the trail your mind stretches ahead of you, to trust that you already carry the map somewhere inside of you. Because sometimes it's not about a breakthrough, this process. It looks like noticing breath, noticing boundaries, noticing presence, that you're here, and that here is enough. And sometimes, whether that's a cup of coffee or a therapeutic experience with mushrooms or a simple act of walking and wandering, all of these are invitations. Invitations to reconnect with the self you've always been, just maybe didn't know. The one who moves, the one who senses, the one who belongs. And in the noticing, that honoring, we build something that lasts. A life, a rhythm, a ritual, a care practice that says this body, this mind, this me deserves to take up space. And just like that, we go from hiking to something more cosmic. And that pause you just took to feel your foot on the ground, that gentle reminder of that moment of embodiment, it ties you to something ancient, something timeless. It reminds you that you are not lost and that you are not broken. You're a living story, a moving, breathing part of this world's great unfolding, and you are not alone. So let's keep walking together, because this next story, Nacho Nuts, isn't just about science. It's about movement, memory, and how long we've been trying to make sense of where we are. Recently, researchers in Spain have just uncovered what might be the earliest evidence of purposeful movement in animals. Trace fossils left behind in ancient sea floor sediments that are 554 million years old. That's 15 million years before what scientists have long called the Cambrian explosion, when complex life supposedly burst into existence. But here's what's wild. These little trails in the rock, they weren't random squiggles. They were directional, coordinated, intentional. They tell the story of an ancient segmented creature, something with muscles and structure, moving with purpose across the ocean floor, sensing its environment, exploring the unknown. So think about that. Before bones, before eyes, and before brains like ours, there was motion. There was the urge to move through the world. Now, these early animals didn't leave behind skeletons or poetry or podcasts. What they left were footprints of curiosity, traces in the mud, marks that say, I was here, I moved, and I saw it. And that, to me, I don't know about you, but that feels sacred. Because here at Nachos, we talk about being stuck, about burnout, about overwhelm and executive dysfunction. Those days when even getting out of bed feels impossible. But this story, it reminds us that movement is one of our most ancient inheritances. That even before we could articulate our needs or draw maps of our minds, we were beings that reached out, that tried, that wiggled with intention. Maybe we wiggled forward into possibility, but it also reminds us that evolution doesn't just happen all at once. The explosion of complex life didn't burst from nowhere. It was slow. It was incremental. It was quiet, maybe even invisible. But it was happening. And progress doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's a soft, rhythmic ripple under the surface. So maybe today's takeaway is this. Even if your movement feels small, getting dressed, asking a question, saying no, opening a tab to do an assignment, it counts. It starts part of a lineage that starts before time had names. Your movement matters. Your attempts matter. Hell, even your failures matter. You don't have to sprint. You don't even have to walk straight. Just move. And trust that somewhere deep in the strata of your own story, there's evidence that you've already survived so much, but yet you're still seeking the next shoreline. So let's wiggle with intention together and keep going. Because we've come across this ocean floor, tracing the faint signatures of this ancient creature, moving with purpose, carving their story in silt and time, and now we surface millions of years later. And still within the pulse of the past, but this time we find ourselves in the frozen earth of Siberia, face to face with something achingly familiar. Not footprints this time, but faces. 2 tiny ones. And they were found nestled in the permafrost, their fur still intact, their bodies curled up as if in sleep. 2 wolf pups, just a few months old, perfectly preserved after more than 14,000 years. Not quite dogs, not quite modern wolves, but litter mates, sisters, still full of potential, still soft, still tethered to a story that was cut short, and yet somehow continued, frozen in place until we were ready to meet them. Scientists call them Tumat 1 and Tumat 2, but I like to imagine they had names, even if we'll never know them. Because what's clear is that they were part of a pack, born into care, guided by instincts and elders, and nourished not just by milk, but by a life shared amongst family. When researchers looked into their tiny bellies, they found the remnants of their last meal. And this was bits of woolly rhinoceros and a feathered trace of a small bird. They were being fed, protected, held close by something older than language, something that says, we take care of our own. And I can't help but feel a jolt of awe at that. Because here in the frozen stillness of an ice age den, we find the snapshot of tenderness, of belonging, of life doing its very best to continue even when the world was cold and wild and harsh and uncertain. It's easy to romanticize ancient stories, right? To protect ourselves and to project ourselves onto them. But this one feels different because these weren't early pets. They weren't domesticated. They were wild, fully, gloriously wild, and yet still bound by relationship, still growing up under the watchful eyes of wolves who knew how to love. And I think that's something. That long before civilization, before agriculture, before the concept of ownership or even domestication, or even the idea of species boundaries, there was care. There was nurture. There was the kind of wisdom passed down not through words, but through the warm press of bodies in a den, the quiet ritual of feeding, the knowing of when to rest and when to rise. And for me, this story lands like a reminder that we've always been wired for connection, that even the most untamed among us have been shaped by bonds that transcend survival. And that our need for care, for safety, and for togetherness is not a modern invention. It's ancient. It's animal. It's sacred. So when you find yourself overwhelmed or isolated or wondering whether you're moving in the right direction, remember those pups. Remember that your body remembers, that you can carry within you the echo of every pack that came before you. That being held, being fed, being part of something, it isn't weakness. Not at all. It's lineage. And maybe, just maybe, some of the most powerful stories we carry are the ones that were never spoken at all. The stories that were only lived. Lived in the rhythm of the pause or the sharing of food or the warmth of the den. And here we are, thousands of years later, still gathering, still seeking shelter in each other's stories. So if you're there with me, welcome to the pack. And so if we think about holding these tiny frozen faces in time, curled together in an ancient den, we can't help but feel that gentle, unspoken bond, the echo of their lineage across millennia. And this leads us to something wild yet profoundly familiar. The nurture woven deep within the tapestry of Mother Nature. So let's dive into that a little further with an ocean story. Far from the tundra and the ice, in the Pacific Northwest, where a critically endangered population of southern resident killer whales is surprising even the scientists who've studied them for decades. So I want you to picture it. Drone footage so clear you can almost feel the breeze above the Salish Sea. Amid the whales' slow rolls and social calls, researchers noticed something unexpected. Whales using bull kelp like combs, pressing it against each other's skin, rolling and grooming. They weren't just wandering past seaweed, they were breaking off stalks and using them as tools to scratch and clean, in a behavior never before recorded in marine mammals. And what leaps out to me isn't just that they use tools, it's how they do it. They fashion a piece of sea not for feeding, not for play, but for care, for connection, for each other. Across sexes, across ages, and across pods, they share their kelp. They help each other groom. They look after their own, just like those wolf pups. Their story, if you think about the wolf pups, their story was one of implicit care and an icy silence. And here we have orcas actively caring in a social ritual, in an act of cultural complexity, shaped over generations. Now, the Center for Whale Research researcher Michael Weiss said this is incredibly exciting to find whales manufacturing tools, a way never before reported in marine mammals. And once again, we arrive at a NACHOS moment in this story. The reminder that care can take many forms. Quiet, grand, tactile, cultural, gastrointestinal. From the warmth of a puppy den to the kelp-streaked whale skin, the impulse is the same. To reach out, to touch, to nurture. The sense of belonging, of being in relationship to someone or something else, is ancient. It's woven into life, across land, across time, across species. And it whispers to us, and sometimes screams to us. Connection matters. Rituals matter. We are not isolated islands. We are nodes in a network of care that stretches from an ice age, where pups played, to whales in the far Pacific seas. So, wherever you are, maybe you're listening by a window, maybe you're taking notes or folding laundry, imagine reaching for something not to fix, but to tend. Reach out like an orca with a strip of kelp. Let your care be a tool. Let it be gentle. Let it be cultural. Let it be shared. Because whether we're human, canine, or cetacean, belonging lives in our hands and in what we choose to hold in them. So let's sit with that for a moment. We've wandered from ancient seabeds to ice age dens, from woolly rhino-fed wolf pups to orcas gently grooming one another with kelp. And through it all, there's been this quiet undercurrent. The animals we study, especially when we look at them not as objects but as beings, start to undo the boundaries we've drawn around what it means to be human. Because here's the truth, and we don't say this out loud. Animals don't just reflect aspects of our behavior. They complicate our assumptions about what separates us. They challenge the neat categories we build around language, emotion, intelligence, culture, empathy, tools, all of these things. And when we see a whale using seaweed as a comb, when a wolf pup suckles, food that is carried across the ice by an older wolf, when a crow solves puzzles, or an octopus escapes its tank, or a gorilla grieves, what do we do with that? For so long, we've told a story where humanness meant separation. Civilization meant progress. Intelligence meant control. But again and again, these creatures crack that story wide open. They don't speak our words per se, but they speak in gestures, in rituals, and in rhythm. They build, they teach, they comfort, they adapt, they remember. And suddenly, when we realize maybe the things we hold up as uniquely human aren't unique at all, maybe we realize that they're shared. Maybe they're ancient. Maybe they're the very things we thought made us special, like love, grief, caregiving, creativity, are actually things we inherited. Or things we're still learning how to do well by watching those we once thought were beneath us. I think that's the quiet gift animals offer us. Not just delight or curiosity or companionship, but an invitation to loosen our grip on hierarchy, to see ourselves not as kings of an ecosystem, but as part of a wider web of sentient, sensing, meaning-making life. So here in this nachos space where we talk about burnout, self-regulation, community, and belonging, I want to propose something radical and also ancient. What if we stopped using humane to mean kind and started asking animals what kindness looked like? What if we stopped asking, can animals feel what we feel, and instead ask, can we feel what they've always known? What if we stopped trying to separate our brains from our bodies, our minds from nature, and instead remembered that every step we take has roots stretching back millions of years? The more we learn from animals, the more they return, the more we really ultimately return to ourselves. And we return not in superiority or dominance, but in shared breath, in silent rituals, in the gentle grooming of skin with kelp or comb, in the quiet hunger of a pup or a kid waiting for milk. And maybe that's the greatest nachos takeaway of all. That being human doesn't mean being the most advanced. It might just mean being humble enough to learn. When we've been looking at the world through ancient eyes, through the frozen stillness of pups curled in a den, through orcas tenderly brushing each other, through creatures that moved with purpose long before vertebrae evolved, and again, we've returned to one quiet truth. That care is older than civilization. That connection is not something we invented, but something we inherited. And yet, being human adds another layer. Because while animals remind us how deeply wired we are for empathy, it's humans who must choose to institutionalize it. We are the species that build laws, that draw lines, that name rights. And because of that, we are also the species that must reckon with what happens when those systems leave people out. And last week, even with all of the crazy news that's going on, something remarkable happened in the House of Representatives. The Charlotte Woodward Organ Transplant Discrimination Prevention Act passed. And that would prohibit denying organ transplants to people with disabilities simply because they are disabled. So let that sit for a moment. Not because it's a feel-good win, but because it took this long to get here. Charlotte Woodward is a disability rights advocate. She has Down syndrome, and she also is one of the few people with her diagnosis to have received a heart transplant. She lived to advocate. She lived to make sure others wouldn't be told your life isn't viable or your worth isn't high enough for our list. And this is what humanity looks like. Not in the abstract, but in the specific. It looks like policy shaped by lived experience. It looks like someone surviving a system that almost and always excluded her, and then used that survival as a blueprint for change. And it's here, in this moment, that the contrast between instinct and intention becomes profound. Because a whale doesn't debate whether her podmate is worthy of care. A wolf doesn't deny a pup milk based upon perceived potential. But humans? We build systems that ration dignity. We draft algorithms and policies and silent cultural rules that say some lives are worth saving first. So when that pattern is interrupted, when legislation stops to say, this ends here, it's a moment worth honoring, we're celebrating. Not because it makes us noble, but because it brings us back to something older than law. It brings us back to presence, to relational care, to the possibility that we can evolve not just biologically, but ethically. When the House passed this bill last week, it wasn't just a legal act. It was a cultural shift, hopefully. A slow turn towards a future where being disabled doesn't mean being deprioritized, where people with intellectual or developmental disabilities are not pushed to the margins of medicine, but held at the center of human value. Because if the wolf, pup, and the orca have taught us anything, it's this. Belonging precedes language. It precedes IQ scores. It precedes medical assumptions. It's a truth written into breath, into bodies, and into the story of life itself. And now, maybe, just a little, we're catching up. We're remembering. We're choosing to write into law what nature has always modeled. Care is not conditional, and life is not really ranked. That every being matters not just because they can prove their worth, but because they are. And that, Nacho Knots, is what makes us most human. Not our ability to dominate, but our willingness to learn, to grow, to look at what we built and say, we can do better. And last week, in my humble opinion, I think we did. And then we didn't. So we've moved from ancient creatures tracing paths to wolf pups curled up in their maternal den to orcas tenderly grooming one another across the seas. The through line through all of this has been clear. Care is ancient. Connection is primal. And empathy isn't a human invention. It's a living inheritance. But today, we return to our own kind, grounded in collective choice and conscious design. So that vote that took us one step closer to disability affirming dignity and that codification. And now we have another story before us. And this is not about policy or the future, but it's about the now, the blueprint for a reality in today. So imagine a hotel built from the blueprints up to be ultra accommodating. Accessibility, not just meeting the bare minimum, but reimagining what hospitality can feel like for disabled guests. Oversized doorways and hallways, rooms equipped with voice-activated controls, AI concierge tailoring guest experiences before arrival, staff trained not just to assist, but to anticipate. This new standard isn't just an afterthought, it's the foundation of the space itself. And here's why this matters. It's not about meeting legal requirements, it's about walking empathy forward. Orcas give care through seaweed, wolf mothers through milk. Here, we're choosing to build structures that honor belonging, not as a token add-on, but as a baseline. And the designer doesn't retrofit accessibility, it starts with it. The choice placing humanity at the center speaks volumes because once accessibility is no longer a checkbox, it becomes part of our DNA. And there, it'll become part of the hospitality world's DNA. Guests with different bodies and minds can navigate without asking for help. They can access services seamlessly. They can stay with dignity and autonomy that everyone deserves. Witnessing this echoes our NACHOS journey. We honor instinctual care in nature. We acknowledge how humans must decide to make empathy systemic. We celebrated the leap from inclusion as an afterthought to inclusion as a default. And in a world that so often designs for the average without glasses, without mobility aids, without sensory sensitivities, this hotel offers a radical counterpoint. It says, we see you and we build for you. And that truly is a declaration of belonging. So here's where the quiet power lies. We can learn from animals. We can learn from ancient fossils. But when we choose, when we legislate, design, build, and train to put care at the center, we step into our own humanity. And that choice reverberates far beyond the hotel lobby. It says you matter here, always, and forever. It says your dignity isn't negotiable. And it says hospitality isn't about convenience, it's about belonging. And that's what being human looks like when we honor our most ancient inheritance, that inheritance of care. All of these stories, ancient humans, they've led us to this moment. A woven path of fossils and legislation, of kelp in congressional votes, of pups in permafrost, and hotel floor plans drawn with access in mind. At first glance, they seem worlds apart. But if you pause, breathe, and look closely, the thread connecting them is unmistakable. Care. The deliberate, often quiet, world-shaping force of care. And not just care for one species or one kind of body, but for the full, vast spectrum of life. The kind of care that spans from instinct to infrastructure, from fur-lined dens to policy documents. The kind that is embodied in a whale's touch or a mother wolf's provision. A hotel room built to welcome without question, and a law passed to say no more waiting at the back of the line. These aren't just stories of progress. They're stories of possibility, and they ask us to rethink the very story we tell about being human. When we so often define humanity by intelligence, by innovation, and by control. But what if the highest form of humanity lies not in our power, but in our recognition? Our willingness to see another being, any being, and say, you belong here too. Because if care shows up in the animal kingdom without argument, then surely we, with our complex brains and voting systems and architectural blueprints, can do better than exclusion. If a wolf can nurture her pup without metrics, if an orca can sense when her podmate needs a soothing touch, then surely our humanity should be measured by how intentionally we choose to create communities that mirror those same values. And here's where all these threads tighten into something meaningful. Last week's vote, this future hotel, these ancient animals, they're all reminders that our collective humanity isn't fixed. It's in flux. It grows every time we expand the circle of who is seen, who is served, and who is held with dignity. We are not only the product of our intelligence, we are the product of our willingness to remember that our roots are real. And then we choose to rewrite our future with care at its center. So maybe the question Nachos leaves us with this week is this: what will you design with care? What systems, what relationships, or what spaces, or even stories will you build that say without condition, you belong, you matter, you are already enough? Because our collective humanity isn't some distant idea. It's right here, in the kelp, in the vote, in the blueprint, in the breath. And it begins again every time we choose to see each other clearly. And with that, Nacho Knots, we exhale. We've moved through a constellation of stories today, ancient and urgent, instinctual and intentional, all orbiting one central truth: that care is not a luxury. It's a legacy. From wolf pups and whale kelp to hotel blueprints and house floor votes, we trace what it means to be human when we place dignity at the center of our designs. If your breath feels a little deeper, if your shoulders have relaxed just a touch, if your thoughts are turning over gently like stones in the river, you're right where you're meant to be. But don't log off just yet. We've got a full month of connection and community ahead, and I want to invite all of you to it. So here's what's coming up. Today, July 7th, my lecture for the Casey Yale summer camp is dropping. I'm dive into the PB&J framework, the patience, behaviors, communication, and just being present, and explore how it offers a radically compassionate roadmap for self-care, regulation, and surviving neurodivergent life in a world that often misunderstands our needs. So whether you're a student, educator, parent, or fellow traveler, you can watch the session through the Casey website or grab the link from the Nachos Discord or Humanities 101 site. Later in the month, July 29th, I'll be speaking live in Lansing at the Breaking Barriers Disability Pride Celebration, a bold and joyful gathering of disabled leaders, artists, and organizers, and advocates alike coming together to honor our stories and shape our future. So if you're anywhere near mid-Michigan, I hope you'll join us for an incredible day of solidarity, community building, and pride. And don't forget, we are just over 100 days away from the first ever Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference, happening October 24th at the Henry Ford College campus. We're building something rare here, a free cross-sector youth-powered neuro-affirming event that centers lived experience, creativity, and collective care. Most academic and advocacy conferences charge hefty registration fees, but we believe access should never depend on income. That's why we're doing everything we can to keep this event free for all attendees. If you'd like to help us make that dream real, there are 3 ways that you can support. Share the word. Send this link. Invite your friends, students, coworkers, colleagues, or that one relative who needs to hear this message. Donate what you can. Even $5 helps us feed volunteers, print materials, and keep accessibility front and center. Or join the crew. Volunteer. Come to be a presenter, come to be a volunteer, come to a table, or just show up. Your presence is also part of the movement. Everywhere I go this month, from Yale to Lansing to our own digital Nachos studio, I carry this community with me. You are the story. You are the spark. So until next time, remember to breathe deeply, care boldly, and remember, your presence is not just enough, it's powerful. We'll see you next week, Nacho Knots, and don't forget your snacks, and maybe bring a friend. So wherever you are right now, curled up on the couch, driving through traffic, half listening while trying to get through the day, I want you to pause with me just for a moment before we go, because you've made it. You showed up. And in a world that rarely sees the full depth of you, that is no small thing. This week, we wandered through so many stories across time, across species, and across systems. We watched whales comb each other with kelp. We imagined pups cradled in permafrost. We traced ancient footsteps of ancient sea creatures. We celebrated modern victories. We saw care in its many forms, woven into both instinct and intention. And through it all, one message kept rising to the surface. You deserve to be here. You, not a future you, a more put together version of you, not a masked version or a palatable, polished, easy to accommodate version. You, the you who is tired, the you who is curious, asking questions, the you who is quietly holding so much. That you belongs here. That you is already enough. And maybe no one has ever told you that before, or maybe you've had to fight like hell to believe it. So let me tell you again, you belong. You matter. You are not broken. You are becoming. You don't have to earn rest or belonging or softness. You were born into a lineage of care, and you carry it forward even when it feels heavy. And here's the thing, Nacho Knots. This isn't just a podcast or a video or a TikTok live. It's a community. It's a constellation of wildly unique, beautifully complex people, all orbiting around the belief that neurodivergent life is not a deviation from humanity, but an expansion of it. When you show up here, tired, joyful, confused, bursting with ideas, or running on empty, you remind the rest of us that we don't have to do it alone, that there's power in unmasking, that community is built not in perfection, but in presence. So this week, if you need to rest, rest. If you need to rage a little, or a lot. If you need to ask for help, ask for help. If you just want to be held by a soft voice that says you're doing better than you think, this is that voice. You are already enough just by being here. And we're so grateful that you are. Now, we'll keep building this movement with care, with stories, with science, and with snacks. But for now, know this. You are part of something. You are part of something big, and you're seen. And this messy, beautiful, non-linear becoming you're in, it's not a detour. It's the way. So take what you need from today's episode and leave the rest, and carry this truth with you. The world needs what only you can offer at your pace, in your rhythm, with your voice. So we'll be here next week, waiting with open arms and open snacks. So until then, care boldly, rest gently, and keep going exactly as you are, because we're better with you in the room. And this is Nachos, and you're home, guys.